unable to compete with large multinational corporations. So bilateral trade agreements may also result of closing down those industries or firms which are unable to compete with the competition of multinational companies. The main goal of bilateral trade agreements are to expand the access between two countries' markets and increase their economic growth. Mainly these agreements are taking place for the purpose of expansion of market and economic growth. The standardized business operations in 5 general areas prevent one country from stealing another innovative product, dumping goods at a same cost or using unfair subsidies. So standardized business operations in 5 general areas which will prevent one country from stealing another innovative products, dumping goods at a small cost or using unfair subsidies. Bilateral trade agreements standardize regulations, labor standards and environmental protections. So it will standardize the labor standards, then it also helpful for environmental protections. So some of the bilateral agreements: India Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, then India Nepal Treaty of Trade, India Bhutan Agreement on Trade, Commerce and Transit. I have taken only the example of India's bilateral agreements, some of the India's bilateral agreements. Okay. Next we'll move on to the concept of the brief explanation of trilateral treaty or trilateral negotiation. The trilateral treaty proposed here would cover 3 specific categories of weapons: launchers for ground launched cruise missiles, ground launched ballistic missiles and ground launched boost glide missiles with range over 475 kilometers. So this is an agreement made for the missiles, especially in armed force or military force missiles, which is required for the countries. Then it is also, the treaty also made for the purpose of missiles along with submarine launched ballistic missile, so SLBM, then bombers with ranges greater than 2000 kilometers. So trilateral treaty usually takes place regarding the import and export of the war materials. And China, Russia and the United States should conclude a treaty prohibiting the testing or deployment of space-based missile defense weapons. So this is one of the treaty expected that regarding space-based missile usage. So China, Russia and United States. As it states, trilateral treaty is a treaty or agreement between 3 countries. Okay, let us discuss about multilateral trade agreement. The multilateral treaties or agreement is an agreement signed between more than 2 countries, usually denoting participation by a majority of the world's countries. So multilateral trade agreements taking place between more than 2 countries. Multilateral treaties cover practically every substantive field of international law, from human rights to inter-country agreements on matters such as trade or transportation. They are usually intended to lower trade barriers between participating countries, and as a consequence increase the degree of economic integration between the participants. So these multilateral trade agreements usually intended to reduce the trade barriers between the participating countries. How many countries are involved in that? Maybe Asian countries, European countries, or American countries. And as a consequence, increase the degree of economic integration between the participants, mainly for the purpose of economic integration and to lower the trade barriers. The multilateral trade agreement are considered the most effectively the way of liberalizing trade in an interdependent global economy, mainly for the purpose of the liberalization of trade. The multilateral trade agreements strengthen the global economy by making developing countries more competitive. Mainly these multilateral agreements are taking place for the purpose of making developing countries competitive. The standardized imports and export procedures giving economic benefits to all the member nations. So when there is agreement takes place among the trading countries, then the import and export will be standardized, which will result the member nations will get more economic benefits. The complexity helps those that can take advantage of globalization, while those who cannot often face hardship. So it will be helpful to those who have taken the advantage of globalization, opening up the economy to the entire world, and who has not taken the benefit also. The operating agreements, so some of the agreements, multilateral agreements which has taken place. Economic and Monetary Union, it is Eurozone, that is European countries, then Switzerland and Liechtenstein, then Economic Union, Customs and Monetary Union, Customs Union, Common Market, and India's agreement, that is Agreement on South Asian Free Trade Area, that is SAFTA. SAFTA, that is India, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Bhutan and Maldives and Afghanistan has made an agreement. Most of the South Asian countries, that is called as SAFTA, one of the agreement. So as a conclusion, the most common trade agreements are of the preferential to grow mutually and improve relationship between countries. So these agreements, especially the bilateral, trilateral or multilateral trade agreements, mainly made for the purpose of improving relationship between the countries, improving the economic relationship between the countries, which are concluded in order to reduce tariff, quotas and other trade restrictions on items traded between the signatory countries. So it will be helpful, these agreements will be helpful to reduce or complete eliminate the tariffs, quotas and other trade restrictions on the commodities traded between the signatory countries. The policies or agreements made between the trading countries is helpful for the smooth functioning of the trade relationship between one country to another country. Thank you.